Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books. I come to you from my garage because the 4-year-old is up and ready for business, so I can't use the den to have the nice backdrop of books. But I'm doing an update on the rise and fall of the Third Reich because I've gotten to 50%, or so my Kindle app says. I've noticed that there's a difference. On my regular Kindle, it's 3% behind what it says on my Kindle app. And I don't usually use the Kindle app. I usually bring my Kindle with me. But this week, I forgot. And so I remembered, oh yeah, my husband put a Kindle app on my phone. So I used that, and I noticed that I was further ahead there than on my own Kindle. So according to the Kindle app, I'm 50%. And according to my Kindle, I'm 47%. However, it's a really good breaking point because we've gotten up to September 1st, 1939, when World War II officially starts, when Hitler invades Poland. So the last time I reported I was at 26%, and that was when Hitler was just taking over Austria. But I think I didn't really go into his rise to power. He became very involved with the Nazi Party. It changed its name when he first got involved. But he got really involved with that. It was a small outlier party that wasn't very popular. But he worked really hard to expand it. And then the Depression happened, and that made everyone get more extreme, and it started to garner more and more support. And then, he tried that putsch, or whatever you call it, putsch, Putsch, the beer hall putsch, and that was unsuccessful, so he got thrown in jail for just a little bit. They weren't very hard about things like that. He writes Mein Kampf, where he lays out how his glorious evil plan. And then he gets out again. He decides he's going to work within the system to gain power. So he works really hard at that. And boy, was the Weimar Republic a hot mess. It was just a hot mess. They really didn't know how to do democracy very well. But then when he finally gets into power, they get the majority, so he becomes chancellor, and he has to really finagle and work hard for that. And then once he becomes chancellor, it's pretty clear that they stage this fake. It wasn't fake, but there's a fire at the Reichstag, which is the house where the legislature meets. And he claims that it's a communist attack or uprising. And so he, in their constitution, harkens back to the Romans. They were able to be made dictator for a certain amount of time. And so he gets dictatorial powers because of that, because he says there's a crisis, even though they probably manufactured it. It probably wasn't the communists. It was probably the Nazis themselves that did it. Then once he becomes dictator, he starts really consolidating his power. When Hindenburg, Field Marshal Hindenburg, who was a great hero to the German people, dies, Hitler, and he had been the president, Hitler takes over that position as well. So he's chancellor and president rolled into one. And then later on, he makes himself the head of the armed forces as well, because that had been a separate position. So he becomes the total leader of Germany. He has all the power. And then about a year after he first got into power, I think as chancellor, and I might be fuzzy already on the details, he starts noticing that his fellow Nazis, not all of them are going along with his program. And so he and his little tight circle of Göring and Himmler. I'm not sure who was exactly involved in orchestrating this, but they decide that they're going to get rid of the Nazis that maybe aren't going along with Hitler, including Hitler's friend that he had worked with for 8 years building up the Nazi party. His name was Roehm, Roehm. He has him murdered. They just go out one night and they just start murdering people, fellow Nazis, that they've decided weren't pure enough, and weren't following Hitler closely enough. So that was something. Right away, Hitler built a concentration camp, not for Jews yet, but for political prisoners. He was really, really a bad person. And they took over the press so that the German people, there was no freedom of press anymore. It was all propaganda. And the Germans wound up being really isolated from the rest of the world. They were getting very, very biased propaganda as news. And so then Hitler starts trying to take over, to expand German territory. So first he, what's the first thing he does? He goes after the Rhineland that had been taken from him. Well, he saw it that way, but had been taken from Germany in the Versailles Treaty. I think this was disputed land. This land was always kind of a problem. But he takes that over. Nobody says anything. Then he goes after Austria, and boy, that was a lot of double crossing and deceit, but nobody says anything about that. And then he gets really gutsy and he goes after the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, and that takes a lot of negotiating and conniving and double dealing. But Neville Chamberlain, this author of this book, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, really blames him a lot. And I guess history does too, that he was so into this policy of appeasement that he really enabled Hitler and made him stronger, made him more confident in what he was doing. And he just messed things up. Like at the time, the German army, the army officials didn't think that Germany was powerful enough. Their military wasn't built up enough to take on the other world powers, and they were really afraid that if they took the Sudetenland, that would trigger a world war. So they were scared. So they actually were conspiring against Hitler, and they had this plan that they were going to basically stage a coup. But Chamberlain, at the last minute, with his policy of appeasement, actually kind of deflated their plan. Their plan was based on he just kind of pulled the rug out from under them, and it wound up just fizzling out. And they were scared to death anyway to do it. But they had planned to do it, but all the, I don't know, my DVD player is so weird in this car. Wait, it's always making noises even when the engine isn't on. Anyway, yeah. Isn't that weird? Why is it doing that? The engine isn't even running. Stop. Anyway, so going into Czechoslovakia was just the worst thing, and Chamberlain should have realized then. But people they really wanted to believe that Hitler was a good liar, and they really wanted to believe that he wasn't as bad as he seemed to be. But also Chamberlain, I think there were certain sympathies. Like Nazism was the extreme, the evil extreme. But a lot of people were kind of sympathetic to nationalism, and they were anti-Semitic, and they weren't as appalled by him as maybe they ought to have been, because of these really bad cultural trends that were going on anyway, and his form of Nazism was just sort of this crazy, extreme version of what was kind of commonly accepted at the time. But Chamberlain was he finally had his eyes opened after Czechoslovakia. Because what happened was Hitler went in, took the Sudetenland, and then took the rest of Czechoslovakia. And once that happened, suddenly everybody realized that Poland was the next logical thing, and Poland now had no defenses against Hitler. And the crazy way they had divided things up with the Versailles Treaty is that there was something called the Free City. Danzig was German inside Polish territory. So there was this German city inside the Polish country. And then they had this corridor so that Germany could get to it back and forth. And so Hitler makes that the big reason why he wants to go into Poland. But he's really scared now because Chamberlain starts to realize that what Hitler's up to, and he sort of has the scales fall from his eyes. And so they're going to put their foot down with Poland. And Hitler's really hoping that it's just going to be sort of a sham war and that they really don't care that much. And in the meantime, Hitler is working with Mussolini and Stalin. So initially, Hitler really hated Stalin and the Soviet Union. But then he started to realize that he couldn't, in order to take over Poland, he couldn't fight both Russia and Britain and France, and that's what might happen. So he negotiates this non-aggression pact with Stalin. And this book goes into so much detail, like just every single telegram, every single conversation, every single letter, just every meeting is documented, from different perspectives even. So it's a very, very detailed history, and I just can't remember everybody's name or who does what and who calls whom and who flies there at 3 a.m. in the morning and da-da-da-da. I mean, but there was this flurry of just futile activity because everyone's double-crossing. Well, not everyone. Hitler is double-crossing everyone, and so he's just playing everybody for a fool. And he's also, though, sometimes being consistent because he starts to get scared too when he realizes what might happen. But then something will happen, somebody will say something, or he'll rethink things, and then he'll decide, okay, we're going to go ahead with it. Initially, I think in April, he decided they were going to invade Poland September 1st. Then as things went on, he moved it up to August 26th. But right at the end there was such an incredible flurry of activity. Just bizarre stuff was happening. And Mussolini, he didn't let Mussolini in on this. He was acting like he was really great buddies with Mussolini up until Poland. But he didn't tell him about wanting to invade Poland until the very end. So Mussolini realized that he had been left out of this. And Mussolini knows that because of his alliance with Hitler, that once World War II is triggered, he's going to get attacked. And he says, I can't support you in this. And Mussolini did everything he could to dissuade Hitler from invading Poland because he knew that his military was stretched too thin and he wasn't going to be able to defend Italy adequately. And so he knew it was just a death knell for Italy. And so he tried to persuade Hitler. Honestly, he came the closest to persuading Hitler not to invade Poland. But on the other hand, Stalin suddenly got friendly with Hitler. And Stalin came to regret this, of course. But at the time, he thought that he was doing the best for the USSR by having this treaty with Hitler, so that they wouldn't defend Poland, which is what. So Britain and France were trying to get trying to get Stalin to agree to fight Hitler if Hitler invaded Poland, and at the same time, Hitler was trying to get this non-aggression pact with Hitler to say don't fight, and so Stalin is dealing with both these groups at the same time. And Hitler wound up getting there first. The British and the French were just so weak and so indecisive and slow that they just didn't, and they didn't read what was going on because Hitler was so deceptive. That they just didn't read what was going on, so they weren't quick enough, and Hitler got there first, and so Stalin signs his non-aggression pact. One thing that I'm getting too long, but one thing that I want to note about the author is I really disagreed with his sort of scorning Poland for not agreeing to let Stalin. So Stalin, in order to defend Poland, said he had to be able to have his troops come into Poland in order to defend it. And Poland wasn't having any of that. And so this author, Shire, blames Poland. They said, well, if they had let that Stalin come in, then Hitler couldn't have invaded. But Poland didn't know that Hitler was going to come in and, turn it into, put all the concentration camps in the final solution. They didn't know that. And their history with Russia had taken over Poland before for decades. So they didn't trust either Stalin or Hitler, and who would, I mean, it was really, it was two evil options. Neither one was good. And so they were just going to see what happened. And when it happened, if Hitler did attack, then they were just going to fight to the death. There was nothing else they could do. And so I thought it was really unfair the way this guy condemns Poland. Poland had no good choice. And the reason Poland had no good choice was Neville Chamberlain. Neville Chamberlain's appeasement policy did so much damage to the balance of, or the defenses of the Eastern Europe from Hitler, that they were just put in this they were backed in this horrible corner, and the only thing they could do was fight to the death. So I blame Neville Chamberlain. Did you know he had a nephew who lived in Germany and was a Nazi? So I don't know, Neville Chamberlain does not come off well in this book. So that's my update of the rise and fall of the Third Reich. We're just on the cusp of the actual war. It's 4:30 a.m. and they are starting to invade Poland. So that's my update. Talk to you later. Bye.